sign, it's the dove. That threw me for a loop. The other one was we're passing trays now, and I think I knew about that, but it just didn't cross my mind, and I was totally thrown off this morning. It was great, and I love when we do something different because it makes me think, and it makes me really have to pay attention because I'm wait, when did that happen? I remember. Okay, just so many things. It's good, and it's great to be here. If you are a guest with us for the first time, we're glad that you're here. I hope you'll stick around and let us get to know you a little bit. But I see a lot of familiar faces and a lot of people that have been coming on a regular basis here. I don't know if you have this problem, but my wife and I tend to have a disagreement about what we do when we go in stores. When I go to a store, I have 5 things I'm going to get. I am on a mission, and I'm going to be out of there as quick as I possibly can. And when I go with my wife, I love her. She wants to look at every aisle. And the dollar section at Target, y'all know what I'm talking about, right? Like 40 minutes there, and I'm standing there with the kids, and I'm going, yeah, you know what, next time I'll let you go by yourself. But we both have different ideas about what we're supposed to do in a store. I'm on a mission. I want to stay on mission. I want to get out of there as quick as I can so I can go home. Now, my other problem is when we go into a Bass Pro Shops, like me and my father-in-law, we go in there and we spend like 3 hours. So I got really no room to talk about what it is to stay in a store for long periods of time, whether it is we're looking at how many things that we could buy or what we need for fishing, and then we end up coming out of there with a bunch of stuff that we don't need. Same thing happens, but there's a lot of distractions that we find in stores and in other places that cause us to lose our mission. One of those, mine is Bass Pro Shops, hers is Target. And we find this divide because we enjoy the places that we're going. We want to see what they have that's new. We want to see what we could use and what we could get. And the same thing happens in life, right? The same thing happens in life when we watch the news and we see political trends or stock markets or bad things that are happening, and we allow these distractions to kind of get us off course. Now, good or bad distractions can take us off mission. Good or bad distractions can cause encouragement or they can cause discouragement. Distractions can push us to joy or they can cause us to go down a path of amplification, magnification. Everything's worse when things are bad. Everything's super good when things are super good. And if we don't have a mind to stay on mission, it's hard to stay on mission. If we don't have a mind to say, this is what I'm going to do, this is what I'm going to pursue, this is the way I'm going to be, I'm going to focus on this. And sometimes it's people, right? Sometimes you're at work and you're working on something, and you're working on a project and you're excited about it and you're going to do this, and then you show it to somebody else and they don't have the same excitement or enthusiasm about that thing that you do. And they share with you criticisms. And wow, you could change this or look at this, or this might not work, or this might not be what we think it is, or this might not, work here, or this or that. And then it can turn one of two ways. It can turn into, hey, I can make this better, or wow, maybe I shouldn't do this. And when you don't have a mission in mind, when you don't have a goal, when you don't have a vision, when you don't have something that's gonna drive you through those distractions and that discouragement, then you start to doubt that what you're doing is even what you're supposed to be doing. You start to doubt it. Am I really on this path? Am I really supposed to do this thing or be this way or have this thing? And that's really what our problem boils down to this morning. Our problem boils down to that discouragement takes our attention away from what is truly important. Everything is amplified. I could talk about some of my ministry experiences in the past where I felt this type of discouragement and everything was blown up, everything was magnified. I couldn't see anything else but what was right in front of me. And I couldn't see past what the problem was. But like some will tell you, discouragement can also be recognized as growing pains. Discouragement can also be recognized as something that's causing us to grow, and usually you don't see it till after it's passed. They say you can look, hindsight's 20/20, but you can't see what the future is. And you can't understand what's going to be what's going to happen tomorrow, but you can look back and connect the dots. And you can say, well, maybe this, that, and the other, maybe that was for a reason. But again, discouragement pulls us down, drags us down, tries to hurt us, deceive us, push us in directions we don't desire to go. And then we end up in a place we never intended to be. Because we allowed a distraction and a discouragement to push us towards and to push us away from our mission. Whether it's evangelism, whether it's Bible study, whether it's prayer life, whether you name the number of things that we could put on the list that have to do with spirituality and the distractions that we could find. Everybody has one of these little things right here. I could read my Bible on my phone. Yeah? Oh, but I got a TikTok notification. Instagram, Facebook, all those. And all of a sudden, I find myself on a rabbit trail looking for what I never intended to look for. And then I remember, oh yeah, I was supposed to pray. Oh, but now dinner's getting ready and I have to help get kids ready and I have to help do this, but I intended, but I can't. And these distractions and all of a sudden, you notice that you've gone off course, that these habits that you've created were good until the distractions pulled you away. And until life smacked you in the face and discouraged you from doing what God called you to be. Discouragement is real. It is prominent. Now, the book we're going to deal with this morning is in 2 Timothy. You have your Bibles, go ahead and turn to 2 Timothy chapter 2. And we're really going to dive into this passage, but before we jump straight into 2 Timothy, I want us to understand, what is that? Somebody's filling up a baptistry. Before we jump straight into the text, I want us to grab some context and grab some background of Timothy. Because in order to understand what Paul is going to say in 14 through 26, we have to understand what he said prior. And prior, we understand that Timothy is dealing with discouragement. Timothy has a background of faith. Timothy is a close companion of the Apostle Paul. And Timothy is discouraged to the point where he is ashamed to share the truth with the church. And Paul is living in Rome, as we know from 2 Timothy chapter 4, and he's about to die, and Paul is telling him, come to me as soon as you can, because I fear this is the end, and I want to see you before I die. And a discouraged man is writing a letter of encouragement to a discouraged man. Simply put, I don't know if this was a dream or if it was real, but I tried to think back on it, but I remember I was pretty young, and I went into the kitchen at my house in San Diego. And this was around the time The Sandlot came out. Everybody remember The Sandlot? You ever seen The Sandlot? Where they go, they're trying to figure out who the big dog is in the backyard, and they say, camp out! And they all go up in the treehouse. Well, when the one little boy gets to the treehouse, and he gets up there, and he says, you want a s'more? And he says, s'more what? And he's roasting marshmallows over a candle. Well, I thought that was a good idea. So I took one of my mom's candles and I put it on the counter and I found a lighter or a match or something and lit it, and I grabbed a marshmallow and a toothpick and I started roasting it. And I thought this was the coolest thing ever. I mean, this was so cool. And then my little brother comes and he blows out the flame. Totally just destroys what I was trying to do. Now, I don't think I had another match or another lighter or anything like that. But sometimes that's how life is, isn't it? Sometimes you're doing the work, you're doing good, you're going down a path, and somebody just comes up and goes, blows out your candle, blows out your flame. That's what Timothy's dealing with. That's where Timothy's at. He had this flame, this fire going for the Lord. And he was preaching and he was doing good, and he was on the path and doing the things that he was charged with by Paul, and somebody was coming and continuously blowing out his flame. Particularly the leaders at the church in Ephesus. Now we know this from 1 Timothy chapter 1 and verse 20, because he marks these two individuals, Hymenaeus and Alexander, who are teaching that the law is bad when Paul rebukes them and says that the law is good. That these leaders in the church were doing things the wrong way and creating controversies and being involved in irreverent babble and quarreling about words. And we see this same individual in 2 Timothy chapter 2 and verses 14 through 16. Hymenaeus and Philetus, and also at the end of 2 Timothy chapter 4, where these leaders are causing unnecessary controversies. They're fighting with Timothy. They're trying to discourage him. They're trying to push him away, push him out, discourage him from teaching the truth. And if you look back, that's what you see at the end of chapter 1. He uses this word ashamed. That you have no reason to be ashamed to teach the truth. You have no reason to be ashamed to uphold these values and morals. But you're allowing the people that you're working with to discourage you. You're allowing their distractions to discourage you. I mean, just look at the first one. He says, remind them of these things and charge them before God, not to quarrel about words, which does no good, but only ruins hearers. Have you ever heard an argument over a nuance? Have you ever heard over an argument over something that didn't matter? Have you ever been involved in something, it was trivial. It made no difference whatsoever if we came to an agreement or didn't come to an agreement, but yet people found a reason to argue, to divide, to quarrel. And even have you ever seen a respectable man get involved with that type of thing? Quarreling, dividing, no reason, no good reason, other than to assert his dominance over that other person. Paul says, look, don't quarrel about words. It doesn't do any good for anybody who's listening to you speak and preach. And these guys that are doing this, they don't understand what God has called you to be. They don't understand what God has called them to be. And so he switches back and forth between verse 14 and verse 26, telling Timothy, reminding Timothy, encouraging Timothy what he's supposed to do, and doing things like this, where he tells Timothy, do your best to present yourself to God as one approved. That means genuine, tested, vetted. Someone, he is genuinely an individual who's like, hey, we don't have any worries about whether or not Timothy's going to teach the truth because he's been teaching the truth. He has taught the truth, and he's not going to do anything to cause controversy. It's in contrast to what we see in verse 14 and verses like verse 16. A worker who has no need to be ashamed, rightly handling the word of truth. We got markers. Then look what these other individuals are doing. But avoid irreverent babble, for it will lead people into more and more ungodliness, and their talk will spread like gangrene or cancer. There is no end but death, is what he's saying. There is no end. There's this fruitless talk. This is worthless. We shouldn't be discussing these things. We've got more important things to focus on than nuances, trivial things. Among them are Hymenaeus and Philetus, who have swerved from the truth, saying that the resurrection has already happened. And they are upsetting the faith of some. They were causing controversy. I don't think here Paul is even referencing hair-splitting arguments. I think he's referencing big deal things. That Jesus raised from the dead. When are those who have followed Jesus and committed their lives to Christ going to be resurrected? What is the importance of baptism? What is the importance of unity within the church? Big things. Things that people were constantly, I found this new, I'm going to go this direction. I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to be this way. And they took the opposite, the controversy. They swerved from the truth. They're claiming the one thing that Christianity hinges on has already happened. The one thing that people have hope for, that people are waiting for, has already happened. What are you talking about? Did we miss it? Could you imagine the conversation that takes place? The conversation that is being dealt with here? The discouragement that is being experienced from Timothy as he deals and combats this teaching from these leaders in the church. And then look what he says. But God's firm foundation stands bearing this seal. The Lord knows who are his. And let everyone who names the name of the Lord depart from iniquity. In other words, what he's saying to Timothy is, be encouraged. you belong to God. God knows who belongs to him. It is not a matter of, I'm doing it this way or being this way. Humans expect perfection, right? People in the church, well, if they become Christian, they have to, maybe that's not the case here, but I've been in places where the case is you become a Christian and all of a sudden you fix all your problems and you become perfect. And the struggles don't exist and the discouragement doesn't exist. And there's a fire and you're supposed to go do things and be certain ways. But it doesn't work that way. But God knows who are his. And those who are God's don't live in sin. Remember that, Timothy. Remember that. Therefore, if anyone cleanses himself, well, I missed a verse there. There's a verse, I missed 2 verses. Let's go back up to verse 20. Because I really want to capture this illustration that Paul uses to talk about what he's just talked about. To illustrate, to give us a visual of what it looks like. Look at verse 20. Now in a large house, there are not only gold and silver vessels, but also vessels of wood and earthenware, and some to honor and some to dishonor. What he's saying is that there are items that we consider valuable and items we consider less valuable. Verse 21, therefore, if anyone cleanses himself of these things from what is dishonorable, he will be a vessel for honorable use, set apart as holy, useful to the master of the house, ready for every good work. Now remember, he repeats that last phrase down in chapter 3 and verse 16. About the scripture, that all scripture is given by inspiration of God and profitable for doctrine, for reproof, for correction, for training in righteousness, that the man of God may be equipped thoroughly for every good work. That Paul wants Timothy to focus on something. He doesn't want him to be distracted by whether or not he is this way, or he doesn't want him to be discouraged by the leaders that are pushing him down a certain path. He wants him to be encouraged to stay on mission. Stay on mission, Timothy. Don't allow those people to push you in a direction that you weren't called to make you question what you're doing, when you know that what you're doing is for the Lord. Look at verse 22. So flee youthful passions, right? Because all those things that he just talked about, you got to think about what he's drawing in. What he's drawing in is that idea of controversy. The controversies, the irreverent babble, the quarreling about words, the immaturity that's taking place, the focus on trivial things rather than important things has caused him to be distracted. And he tells them what to pursue. Pursue righteousness, faith, love, and peace along with those who call on the Lord from a pure heart. Keep yourself away from the people that are going to bring you down a path that you don't want to be on. Keep yourself away from those discouragers. Find the people that are really seeking God and stick to them and pursue righteousness, faith, and love with them. But let me tell you what to do with the people that don't want to follow that path. Have nothing to do with foolish, ignorant controversies. You know that they breed quarrels. And that the Lord's servant, minister, preacher, whatever you want to call him, he's talking to Timothy, must not be quarrelsome, but kind to everyone, able to teach, patiently enduring evil, correcting his opponents with gentleness, that God may perhaps grant them repentance, leading to a knowledge of the truth, and that they may come to their senses and escape from the snare of the devil after being captured by him to do his will. Now there's a lot there. There's a lot that Paul wants us to grasp in this section. So for a second, let's go back. He says, look, if you want to stay on mission, don't have anything to do with controversies. Don't have anything to do that breeds quarrels. And make sure you yourself are not quarrelsome, but that you're the opposite of what they're being, that you're kind to everyone, able to teach, patient when enduring evil. You know, patient just means slow to anger. When we think patient means, we got to have it now. I'm not going to do this. That's impulsivity, right? When you go to the store and you got to buy and you see something and you're just like, I'm going to buy it. But you don't think about it. That's not impatience. That's impulsivity. That's impulse. I do this because I'm going to do it. I'm just going to do it. Impatience is something happened and it makes me angry now. Now I'm angry. Slow to anger is the idea of patient. And the servant of the Lord must be slow to anger. An individual who sits there and looks at a situation that somebody's yelling and screaming in your face, or they have a problem with something that you're doing, sitting there and listening to what they have to say. Okay, maybe I need to think about this a little bit. Maybe I need to examine if what they're saying, if there's anything of what they're saying is true, or if they're just looking to cause problems. Able to teach, patiently enduring evil, correcting his opponents with gentleness. Again, something that's opposite, evidently opposite of what Timothy's dealing with. He's saying, just remember that when you're fighting and quarreling with people, that you correct your opponents with gentleness, not anger. Because there is a result that is desired from the way that you act. As a Jesus follower, you shouldn't act a certain way or be a certain way because you want a certain result or you want a certain image. But you should strive to live like Jesus, because when you live like Jesus, things like this happen. That God may grant them repentance, leading to a knowledge of the truth. That when you're dealing with somebody who's living in error, that when you're dealing with somebody who's causing controversies, if you're calm and collected and you understand that maybe I could get through to them, maybe if I just sit and I prayed for them, and even though I might be angry with them internally, what if I prayed for them instead of just being cold to them? What if I just looked at them and said, look, they may not understand where I'm coming from. And you know what? Maybe I'm not totally on 100%. But I feel God calling me to be patient in this situation. I know God asked me to be a patient individual. I know that if I'm kind and loving and caring, that person's not going to know what to do. I mean, what does Paul say in Romans 12? If your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he's thirsty, give him a drink. For in doing so, you will reap coals upon his head. That the expectation is that you will fight. But our fight is different than just the physical. And our outcome is different than what someone who is living to gratify the flesh is desiring. Our desire is to bring people out of captivity, the captivity of sin, and into freedom with Jesus. That's what we're trying to do. And if we're angry all the time, or we don't like something somebody did, or if we're impatient with people and we're not consistently trying to work on developing ourselves and trying to be like Jesus, we're not going to be perfect. I've said it already. You're not going to live perfectly. You're not going to speak perfectly. You're not going to act perfectly. You can try, but you're going to fail. At some point or another, you're going to fail. And that's where God comes in to help you live the way that He desires, the way that He intended you to live. And all these results follow. The people who are captured, these people are captured by Him to do His will. They're enticed, they're pulled. If we can get Him in there, He can divide the church and then this and that and the other. So what's Paul's main mission for Timothy? Is to stay on mission. Don't forget where you're going. Don't forget what you're called to do. Because if you're called to teach the truth, to rightly handle the word of truth, to deal with people in a kind and gentle manner, and you're not doing that, what are you called to? I mean, this doesn't just apply to leaders, this applies to everybody. I mean, you can think about your own life, and because everybody in some capacity is a leader of something. If you're a father, you're a leader of your home. If you're a mother, you lead your children. If you work, you might be a leader at work. You might be an example to people. You might not do things other people do. You might not act the way they act. You might not speak the way they speak. And they notice, and they see, and they look, and they observe at who you are and what it is you're doing. And one day they will ask, Where do you go to church? Why do you not curse? Why are you so patient? Why are you so kind to people when they disagree with you? And I have a problem where I'm just snap at them. Why don't they get it? I don't mean to pick on my dad here, but my dad when we were growing up, he had non-external road rage. You know what I'm talking about? Where you're driving in a car and you say everything under the sun, but you do nothing to enrage the situation. And so, as I learned growing up, guess what fell upon me when I got older? Was that internal road rage. I say things, say whatever I want. Try not to. Try really hard, but I struggle. And when I remember what I'm supposed to be doing, it changes my actions. When I remember that I'm serving the Lord, it changes what I say. When I remember that I said something wrong and my kids are in the car, how am I going to correct that? How am I going to live with that? How do I teach my children to love Jesus if all they see is me angry? The mission causes me to question my actions. So what can you do? What can you do to live for Jesus? What can you do to be an encourager instead of a discourager? What can you do as an individual who may lead somewhere but may not lead in this church? And I'll tell you what you can do right now. We all need to be doing this. And I would encourage you, as I'm going to tell you, to be an encourager, to encourage somebody as you're walking out the door. And you might ask, well, what does that look like? Some of you already know what it looks like. For somebody, some of you are Barnabas. Some of you are Barnabas. You will sit down and you encourage somebody and you'll listen to their struggles and you do whatever you have to do. And you know what it looks like to encourage somebody, to build somebody up. That's what an encourager is. It's somebody, how do you make somebody believe in themselves? Believe that they can do it. Believe that they are capable of following and living like Jesus. How do we do that? Well, I think it's really simple. Number one, listen to their struggles. This involves building a relationship. Now, we could talk about Timothy and Paul's relationship and the mentorship that takes place there. And again, I would encourage you to find somebody in this congregation to take your mantle in what you do for this church. I would encourage you to sit down and listen to their struggles and listen to what they deal with and deal with what they deal with, because you don't know what somebody's dealing with unless you get to know them. And unless they have confidence in you, they probably won't tell you what they're struggling with. The importance of being a mentor, finding somebody who's going to take my job in 10 years, who's going to do what I do when I'm done. When I go to be with the Lord, who's going to do what I do? Who can I train? Who can I show? Who can I help? When you build a relationship based on encouragement, you're going to take my place one day when I'm done. You find somebody like that. You begin to develop a relationship. You listen to their struggles, number one. Number two, ask how you can help. They may tell you there's nothing you can do to help. That's fine. But the point is that you care. The point is that you're there. The point is that you're developing and building this relationship as someone who is an encourager, trying to help somebody believe in themselves and that they can do it, because there's a lot of people, and people even in this room, that don't believe that they can live life like Jesus. And there's a lot of people who think that they can't be this image of perfection. Well, the image of perfection is not what we're striving for. We're striving for Christ-likeness. So ask how you can help. Ask what you can help with. And lastly, share a kind word. Give a compliment. Tell them what you think they're doing well. You want to be an encourager? Share a kind word. You want to make somebody believe that they can do something? You want to make somebody believe in themselves? Share a kind word. Observe what they do. Observe how they act. Observe how they're living their life. And compliment. Share a kind word. Hey, I saw you do this. I really appreciated that you did this. I'm not the best at this, but I try. When I see my wife do something, I try to compliment her. And I think of things all the time. I mean, if you're a husband and you want to encourage your wife, that's a good way to start. Listen to her struggles. Ask her how you can help. Share a kind word with her, because she needs it more than you know. And our goal, as always, in doing all these things is to stay on mission. Stay on mission. If you're here today and you have a need of any kind, we want to encourage you, whether it's you come forward and sit on the front pew, that's okay, but we always encourage you to tell an elder or tell Jerry or myself what you're struggling with or what you're dealing with. As always, if you feel a need, come forward. Please come as we stand and sing. Our God, Jesus, call it.